Thank you so much for joining us. It is Debate 4-on-1 on Royal TV. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Thank you so much for making time. We totally apologize for starting slightly late. Of course, when you have heavyweights in the room, you have to make space for them. Right, so let me bring on board our panelists on today's debate, which is media and patriotism. The key question we'll be asking ourselves are, what are the qualities of a patriotic journalist? And of course, we'll be looking at what other people have been calling cheerleading, and whether it is always there's need to keep asking questions on everything and all that. So let's bring in Gonzag Mugando. Thank you so much for joining us on Debate 4-on-1 on this conversation.
Thank you, Eugene, for having me.
Thank you. Bob Mugabe makes a premiere on the show. Thank you for joining us, Bob.
My pleasure.
Right. We want another rap.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And so he's here.
Yes.
Albert Rudatsimbura, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And of course, Dr. Christopher Kayumba, thank you for joining us on the particular program today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so this whole issue has been going on our social media platforms, and the question that we've been looking at is what people always say in schools, that journalists are trained to be neutral when they are doing what they're doing, and others say no, a journalist can also have their opinion on something. And so we're talking about the issue of patriotism. When does a journalist draw the line and say, here I will report about this regardless of what the interest of my country is on this particular issue? And so I want to start off, I'm trying to think, every time I start with Albert, let me see if this time I can start less. Let me start with the one pointing fingers. Bob, what does a patriotic journalist look like in terms of your own definition of a patriotic journalist?
I don't have a specific definition of a patriotic journalist, because there can be a patriotic citizen. But when you bring in the issue of a patriotic journalist, one would say, patriotism is about the feeling and attachment you have towards your country. But again, when you bring it in, it's a feeling. And then when you, initially it is an ideal. It is a sense of belonging. And when you bring that feeling in the profession, journalism is an art but also a science. So when you bring that feeling to it, it can be abused or misused or misinterpreted based on the fact of the nature of journalism itself. Yes, because to me, when you're a journalist and a responsible journalist who is rational, you're patriotic. Yes.
Right. So let's have the opening remarks before we come in there. Gonzag, he says, that this is a feeling that should not be mixed with your work as a journalist. When it is mixed in there, when you start saying, I'm first, my country first, and all that, it affects how you operate.
I'll use two analogies or examples. There's a very famous quote by Winston Churchill when he said that when he's out of his country, he makes it a rule to avoid attacking his government. But he makes up for the lost time when he goes home. So he was implying that even if he has a problem with his own government, if he's in the opposition, but when he's out of the country, he avoids criticizing the government because it represents his country at that particular time. But when he comes back, he's very ready. If you are to apply to journalism, I would think that same principle should apply, or to a degree should apply, because journalism also operates within a particular context. Because if you go to the ideal, which we are taught in school, or we talked about that journalists are supposed to be neutral in those situations, which is, it's an idea, but it's not practical. It doesn't happen. Usually, you have to understand that there are certain values, there are certain conditions where you live, where you work, and if you are best to do your job, you also have to go along with the values that inform your country. But which is different, and should always be differentiated from when it becomes necessary to differentiate the country's patriotic values from the particular government that is in power at the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Albert, in this conversation, based on what Bob says and what Gonzag says, especially when it comes to whether you should ever think of that thing behind your head in terms of your country first and all that, and he says you should never mix this feeling. Does it make sense to you?
Well,
I don't think they're very far from each other in what they say, actually. But then the good thing for me is that I didn't go to school, so I don't have all those. I came to journalism by, I would say, the natural way of, because I see it as another extension, according to me, not scientific, not at all, but more a thing of the brain. It's part of the creative. A book, writing an article, taking a picture, producing a movie. Nature of how you use that brain to share something with an audience, with more people, will imply the way you are. So if you are patriot, obviously it will spill over in what you do. So I don't see it immediately as a conflict, but it has the angle of Winston Churchill in the values that you say. When you are patriot, that doesn't mean that you cannot criticize your own government. That was what Winston was doing when he was back. He was pulling all of his energy and his heart and commitment to a patriotic stand by criticizing his own people, actually. So you can be the same. You can be the same. So a patriot journalist, there is no conflict of interest, according to me.
Right. It can never be a conflict of interest at all.
Not according to me.
Yeah, we will build up on that.
Yeah.
You sit or stand in these lecture halls, training journalists or speaking journalistic skills. Albert says, I didn't go to school, and so I don't belong to the same school of thought on this issue.
I don't have the Astrida syndrome.
When you're training these journalists, or when you're talking to them about this issue, where does the issue of patriotism, lie in all this? And does it bring in a conflict of interest? Because that's the key question in this issue.
I think the best way to understand whether there is a conflict of interest or not depends on a number of factors. So let me first make 4 broad points. Number 1 is the definition of patriotism. He talked about patriotism being a feeling that you belong to a country X, and by that very nature you are attached to that city, to that country, and therefore it relates to citizenship. So the theoretical definition of patriotism, there is no disagreement. And as Albert says, everybody believes it is a feeling of attachment to a country. The problem comes with the practical day-to-day meaning of that patriotism. When you relate it to journalism, to a journalist, what does it mean? If you look at how patriotism has been defined, there is a lot of disagreement. Because by the very nature of a journalist is supposed not just to retell the day's events, what happened, but also to explain what does it mean. And most especially, holding power to account. But those who hold power, including me if I'm in the classroom, I might have a different definition of a patriotic journalist. Secondly, therefore, to me, the debate itself of a profession called journalism and patriotism is very problematic and probably divisive. Why? Because it supposes that if you say that they are patriotism and they are patriotic journalists, you are by implication saying they are non-patriotic journalists, and therefore you are dividing professionals. Third, if you look at applied journalism, the practical sense of applied journalism, for example here, in 1990, 92, 93, 94, a patriotic journalist was defined as a journalist who agreed with the Habyarimana regime and those who committed genocide. For example, Hassan Ingezi was one of the journalists that was here celebrated, hobnobbing with people who were in power, because he was in agreement and he was promoting the ideas of the people who defined what is patriotism
and had the tools, the legal, they could make the law, but also they could apply it.
Yeah.
And that is very problematic because today we know that Hassan Njeze was no patriot. But what he did at the time was defined as patriotism. If you look at, for example, in Uganda, there was a story whereby a journalist who reported the war in northern Uganda and talked about the atrocities committed by the military in northern Uganda during the LRA war and the Museveni regime. They showed a picture of a woman who was being shaved in her private parts. And this journalist was taken to what? He was charged in court. So he was being unpatriotic by defeating. But is that unpatriotic? Unpatriotic? And therefore, to me, the definition of a patriotic journalist, the classroom definition of a patriotic journalist, is a journalist who holds power to account and puts out that which is done in the hiding. But that is not the definition.
On the practical.
That is why here, if you talk to people who know, like Albert or these practicing journalists, it has also been problematic in post-genocide Rwanda to find a journalist who we can give a medal. I understand there was that debate, there was that inquiry. There is a commission in charge of finding heroes. So they wanted a journalist, a current journalist who is a patriotic journalist. It is very difficult to pinpoint that person.
Because the yardstick was what at that time? What is the yardstick? What are they looking for? Someone who's always attacking?
For example, we know
what is
that.
the yardstick
For
that
example,
makes it
we know
difficult to
that
get
a patriotic citizen, as he talked about, is, if he's a soldier, is somebody who goes out and defeats the enemy of Rwanda. But who is a patriotic journalist? Is it a person, for example, who would oppose a policy on principle, report it objectively, or is it a journalist who would say, I agree with this policy 100% without question? At the moment, we are doing a study looking at comparing the Habyarimana regime, Kayibanda regime, and during colonial times, and comparing editorial lines of different media houses, Kinyamateka, Imvaho, you know, is there in the editorial lines at any point where they opposed a certain policy or suggested a policy that government does not want, and government said you are doing a great job? We haven't seen that. So where are our patriotic journalists?
Right. That's a question that we'll shoot to Gonzag here, hoping that he will be able to give us an answer to that. You know, standing in there as someone who represents the Association of Rwandan Journalists, he has a question: where are the patriotic journalists? And he says and insinuates that it's actually difficult to pinpoint a journalist who has, you know, criticized a policy, not just to criticize, but to also inform on how best that policy should have been, you know, implemented or done. Do you agree with these thoughts?
That's part of what makes a good journalist. I would think every journalist who is meeting their responsibilities is following the rules and regulations and the code that informs the profession and has the courage to get out all the information that is necessary to hold power to account. But also, beyond holding power to account, there's also the educational part of a journalist. I will not underlook that, because media plays a significant role in influencing how the public responds to certain policies. If it is in healthcare, people going to showing up to pay for their health insurance and so on, or sending children to school. A journalist plays a role. It's not usually recognized so much, but I think it's very significant. So as long as the journalist is doing what they are supposed to do, doing it correctly, despite all the hurdles they face every day, I think they are meeting their responsibility as patriots. Whether they are recognized or not, that is very different. It's a different thing. Because I also remember the situation, because they brought it to us and we said we referred it back to them, the Minister of Culture, about awarding journalists. Said, now, where do you start? Well, the official wrote to us, but we referred it back to them. So because it's not very clear cut. It's not something you say like somebody who saved maybe 200 people during the genocide, that this one clearly did something very heroic. But in every day, I think most journalists are patriots.
Yeah. Let's take the gloves off, because I'm kind of feeling like we are being so diplomatic and so nice with each other on this one.
Then can I hijack a little bit?
Yes,
because
I want us to
because
get the real
I'm
feel
not
of
get
this conversation.
Well, I don't know. You might have started a debate before this show that I'm not aware of, and I might have missed a step because when I personally, when I don't see it, that there is a conflict, because, unless you have a definition that you didn't share with us of what is understood by patriotic journalism, because patriotism, at some point, it's an individual move. It's a choice that you do, which is a bit also like faith. So that's for your inner you. Now, like Gonzague says, by every time, if a journalist does his job correctly, like the policeman, if he does his job correctly, if like the guy who is the public servant who does his job correctly, or the guy who has his shop and does it correctly and respects the public and all that, how aren't these guys not patriot? They are. So, but that thing that you want to label it patriotism, that might be hijacked by some people who are in need of having labels like patriotism, like in those days. Because let's put it for Hassan Yezo or all of these guys working for the genocidaires. Let's say at least they were journalists for a cause, maybe the wrong cause, but they were journalists for a cause. So now, to label them patriotism is because that regime desperately needed to have patriots supporting it. So that is where we are hijacking the concept of patriotism. For me, being professional is already being patriot.
You see,
because
yes, I have been looking. I stand to be corrected. I've been looking in all books, trying most of the books. About journalism, and since when you invited me, I was trying to relate how patriotism and journalism can come together. I didn't find a book defining who is a patriotic journalist. I think this is the word we have just borrowed to have this debate. And therefore, I say, actually, I have found many people arguing about patriotism. And when I bring that thing to this debate, actually, to your attention, is that actually, as Kayumba was referring to, when actually you are introducing this specific subject as a debate, you're actually raising up the issue, and you are giving the advantage of the people he has been saying, who actually who are so desperate, wanting the journalist to be patriotic. I remember one of the media, who is a friend, one of the media CEO here, whom we talked during the Itoriro, this civic thing. When I said no, I'm not going, then he was saying, Robert, you have lost your patriotism, and because I did not go for Itoriro, so I am, to his definition, I'm not patriotic. And I kept thinking, actually, when you bring this debate, actually you are also raising the issues that there is by default a possibility that we have journalists who are not patriotic. And to my understanding, that would be a false feeling, because maybe why can't we even debate about patriotic businessmen, patriotic gender something, patriotic. Then you bring it to journalism, because it is very sensitive. When you bring it to sensitive, it has been portrayed in the oral history that actually most people have been trying to influence journalism to bring this patriotic feeling, to influence it and to work according to the powers.
Who most people are who?
I mean, most governments. See what Hitler was doing with the
let's move away from the books. Let's go practical. Rwanda specifically, because the criticism that has been going on is that we have cheerleading kind of journalists around here, as opposed to journalists who ask the tough questions. For example, we have the Kigali Convention Center, and you have a journalist spending let's say 15 minutes on air talking of how pretty the Kigali Convention Center is, as opposed to, that is fine, it's you're passing out information, as opposed to asking or informing now, okay, fine, there's money that was spent in this. How will it affect you as a taxpayer when it comes to your day-to-day livelihood? Now, secondly, if you are, you know, my country first, and then anything else later, what if you are a correspondent, for example, of an international media house, and you have to report on something that is not so positive about your country? Would you openly, would you easily, just comfortably give the full account of that particular situation without conflict of interest? This is the question we're asking.
I would love to be the first person
Yes.
to come in when it comes to those two questions. I think and I believe that I remember the first time I was asking one official about the convention center. He was like, Robert, where are you going with those stories? Can't you see how others are behaving? Why are you always, you know, calling me all these names? But I remember when I asked the first question about that minister, I was like, okay, there was Eurobond invested to do this. But again, you are telling me now that we have other stakeholders actually who are shareholders in the convention center. How does that come? He says, no, we shall call for a press conference, make sure that you are there. And by the way, these questions are none of your concern. But let me tell you this. I believe that every journalist who are using their resources, who are taking their time to ask tough questions, even to report about the negative report about Rwanda, they are still patriotic, as long as they are not framing the government, like they are not the one coming up with this report. For instance, I wouldn't mind if I report about our troops, how they are doing, maybe if they are doing bad in Central Africa, I would be okay to report about that. And you know why? I want these things to be dealt with, and so that our troops can be safe, or they can do what they are supposed to do in peacekeeping. So reporting, either negative or positive, it shouldn't be portrayed in the sense of patriotism, because it is the clear sense of, and the line of duty of any journalist who is supposed to ask questions. We don't hold the guns. The guns we have is asking questions. If you don't ask questions, and these questions we don't ask them for ourselves, we ask tough questions for the interest of the people. So if you ask, if you investigate, if you bring these hidden issues, this corruption, then to me and to any logical journalist, is a patriot.
But now let me say three quick things. First, we have to understand that journalism is a very special profession. That is why we have a whole chapter in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, chapter 19, defending and talking about this profession. It is through journalism, it is through the media that freedom of expression can be actualized on a larger scale. So it has a special role in society. But that special role, the way it is understood by those in power, by the citizen for whom we report, and the journalist, is very different. And this causes a problem. That is why this concept of patriotism can be very problematic. For example, if I am let us say he's the minister of, say, Ministry X, and he goes to negotiate weapons on Rwanda's behalf. But in between, he buys junk planes, he buys junk arms, because he has taken a 10% bribe, and you report that. By definition, you would be described as unpatriotic. Why? Because they would say you are exposing, you are talking about military stuff and arms and stuff, but that is good journalism at its best, because you are saving the country of money, you are exposing wrongdoing, abuse of office, corruption. But that cannot be taken in by everyone. Secondly, if you if you want to really understand how that can be problematic, read an article by, it's called David Watson. He's talking about the media manipulation and how the idea of patriotism was manipulated and used as a tool of propaganda to start a war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, even this war on terrorism. If you question the narrative, for example, if you question today the narrative of terrorism and how it is fought and where it comes from and how it can be stopped, the contrary view is not always on the mainstream media. Why? Because part of the mainstream media in the US, in the West, is partly driven by that fear of, they will say, I am unpatriotic. And also this feeds into what Gonza was talking. The idea of the national media and the idea of the international media. Most of these developed countries, internally, they have settled certain questions. For example, that expression you cannot be questioned. That freedom of the media is okay. So when they are debating internal domestic policy, they are really patriots, they are questioning their leaders, they are exposing wrongdoing. When they go out to fight the enemy, everybody is putting on a flag. But in context, that is why even historically, if you look at World War I, World War II, how they were fought, patriotism was used as a tool of propaganda. If you look at BBC, there is BBC World Service and BBC, the local radio. The local radio reports from BBC World Service. World Service was started originally to project the power of Great Britain, how wonderful the Queen is, and you could never air anything that contradicts that narrative. And they were talking about Soviet Union as the evil empire. And that's why you have, in the whole of Western Europe, Eastern Europe, BBC played a great role in the defeat, not just in World War I, World War II, but also in the defeat of communist Russia.
Because the journalists put on a flag. They raised
today,
a flag.
Even today, the way the media works in the West, it works on the. Of course, they hide even this idea of a neutral media. The media is not a professional media. A professional media. Media organizations are not started by people who have no interest. Professional, stable, sustainable media houses are started by people who believe in certain ideals. And it is these ideas, that's why we have even what they call editorial policies. Some media houses here, when you say, what is your editorial policy? They say, may I report environment. That is not an editorial line. That is a specialization. Editorial line means there are certain things you believe in and certain things you don't believe in. And therefore, if somebody, a politician promotes, or an individual promotes certain ideas that you don't believe in, you oppose them and you write them negatively. If, for example, you believe in a free market and you get somebody who comes saying that they want government to get involved in business, you oppose that. So this thing called neutral journalism,
it never exists.
It doesn't exist. It exists only when you're talking about day-to-day events, what we call hard news. But in the way we are debating here and what you promote, it doesn't exist.
Right. Albert, specifically on what's going on right now, for example, in Burundi, you tweet a lot, you speak a lot, and some people kind of feel like you are tweeting and sending tweets, with the backing of your country. Like, because there have been those
I guess the guys
of Burundi.
The one that I criticized, eventually.
Yes, so at the end of the day...
Somebody like Nyamitwe believes that you are sent by the government here.
So this is what I'm trying to ask here, because as a journalist, if you were to report about the kind of conflicts between your country versus another country, are you supposed to stand on a side or be neutral and just report as it is? This is the question we're talking about here when you ask about media and patriotism.
There is something that that he started with, and that I'm gonna reach where you propose to go. We need to remember, like, also one of the causes of the downfall of or the defeat of the United States of America in Vietnam was media. and especially also American media, international, but also when American media got in, the United States discovered the horror for which some Americans had been even dragged into to be real patriots and to support their boys in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So there that is, I would say, hijacking the concept of patriotism, because the real guys did a good job to say we are not doing what our politicians are saying that we are doing there. So it was very patriotic, according to me, from these journalists to stand up against it. So that's one thing. That makes you think or raise the question: do you always have to report what you eventually witness? That becomes a personal dilemma, I would say. That is for an individual to crack. But that individual will be influenced by his environment also, because there is an editorial line of that he will follow. That is the theory now. Personally, I've been reporting ever since '94. That is when I got back, and I've been reporting in Congo when it was still Zaire, becoming Congo. I followed Laurent Kabila, the different crises in eastern Congo. Now there is Burundi. And the reason why I personally went into that is that I believe in a cause. I do it with a cause. I have nothing against the regime in Burundi if everything was fine. But when people are dying, when people are being tortured, abducted, and all that, and it's obvious, it's there, then I say, why? And if I have a voice, why? And if I get the information, because with the time, of course, I created this brand, the fact that people feed you also with information. And when you're there, now would I do the same thing if it was Rwanda? I believe so. I believe so. Because this is also how I got back in Rwanda. I left here in 61 or 62, something like that, and got back in 94 because of all of this. So this whole quest keeps me driving all of the time. I have no, I'm not sent by any government. This is a personal choice that I made. And so my doing journalism, it's about that. I believe in Pan-Africanism. That has been my whole education, my whole backdrop. So wherever it happens and I'm around, I will report about that.
Bob, in your own opinion, is this how he should be doing it? Like, as a journalist, do you think when reporting on conflict between your own country, as a patriot, as a person who loves ukundi jihugu chawe, are you supposed to be taking any side, or is he supposed to be asking?
But I'm not taking sides.
I don't know. I'm not here to judge,
Yes.
but the fact is, he said it when what American media did during Vietnam War was patriotic. And actually, it wasn't just the media trying to say what the U.S. troops were doing in Vietnam and everything. Actually, it was an impression of the people, the Americans. They felt, no, this war is not a good idea. And our troops are not exactly doing what our politicians are saying. And actually, from that, it is different from what American media did during the invasion of Iraq, because the American troops went there,
but what I'm asking,
for the nukes,
moving away from
which were not there.
I'm talking about
Yes.
Albert's approach.
But
What's your thought on that
Albert's
of doing things? Yes.
if anybody who started criticizing Nkurunziza was me, when he met President Kagame somewhere in Utare, I don't know, he was consulting, I don't know what, I was. By then, the refugees were already in Rwanda, the Burundi refugees. And President Nkurunziza was here, and he did not even mind trying actually to take an initiative to talk to these refugees and give them hope that we are going to take care of this conflict and you are going to come back to your house. And by the way, not this. By that time, we were still commemorating genocide. He did not even issue any statement when he came here. Two, I criticized his, that's a small thing, about his wardrobe kind of something, his wardrobe. But the issue, his socks, his suit, and everything, which was, I don't know, it was to me it was portraying conflict already. It was there, it was there. Conflict was there. You could see President Nkurunziza, conflict was already in his house. Physically, you would see the symptoms.
Yeah.
But again, going to
and someone would say you would do that because he's not your president.
no,
And
not
if it was
because
on the other side, yes,
because
would you still do the same?
Yes, because I would do the same, but I know the consequences here. I know the consequences.
What are the consequences?
For instance, the consequences is we have more than 14 journalists who are in exile as we speak, and some were taken, were driven from Kigali. You know, one of the journalists was.
I don't.
Fraha was taken to Tanzania, and he was told, from today, your country is Tanzania. Robert Mukombozi cannot, he was given non-personal grata here with immigration. He's a Rwandese. He's now in Australia.
Because he asked questions.
Yes, he worked for the New Times, then he worked for the Daily Monitor. So this guy, actually, he lured me to the New Times when he was sharing the byline with another journalist called Feli Chimei. There were good reports to me. They lured me to leave the radio and come to the print. So by then he was having issues based on his critical reporting. And actually what he was saying later became to be true. But actually, he cannot even come back because in his passport he is given non-personal grant. He can't come back.
As an advocacy group, because at the end of the day, if he is claiming this...
no, I'm not claiming. These are the things in record.
This is factual for
This
you.
is factual. It's not for me.
Yes.
For everybody who would want to verify this.
Fortunately, we haven't had a case in the last 6 years since those times, so you could say there is some improvement. Or maybe the journalists are no longer doing what they
are supposed to do.
No, what others were doing at that time. The point is, we don't advise journalists to ignore the context within which they work, because they have to be there to do their work. Secondly,
So what is that context?
That's a great
the
question.
context of the country we are in. If you take the position, you declare yourself the opposition, and you become a politician more than a journalist, definitely you'll be approached by those who oppose. They will also oppose you in many ways. That's why even trying at least to be impartial on certain issues, as he said on the hard news, which is very important. But we cannot ignore that media is very broad. In a country like Rwanda, or in many places where the internet press is given control, there's diversity. So it's not a problem that one journalist has taken a position on this issue, another has taken the other. It encourages a debate and the exchange of ideas. So that should not be a big problem. Even appearing as an activist, Dr. Gumba talked about that people have interest. Media houses have interest. That you cannot ignore. If you study the modern media in the 1930s and during the Second World War, the intelligence services of various countries played a significant role in promoting media. In some countries, they still do. Even here, we have some media houses owned by intelligence services. So it is not a surprise that they have positions on certain issues. And the only solution is the diversity. Are other people's different views also accessing media, being able to put out their messages?
But there is something here, just to be clear. My reporting on Burundi is not about patriotism. It's about witnessing a crisis. So, and most media have left. So there's very few voices, in fact. So that is the context. Now, coming back to Rwanda, because you were like saying that our journalists a bit too soft and all that. Well, they should not, because if you have an environment that is in fact trying to promote a zero tolerance on corruption, imagine the avenues that you have. Is there a problem with the convention center? Well, dig it up. I mean, if this system wants to cut corruption, it needs information.
But his argument is that the environment doesn't allow for that. He says there's also context. You've been there from 1994 and all through up to now. Is this true? Is this really true? Based on the experience?
There is a serious evolution also of perception of what the media does. It is also an evolution because the players are changing also. The people who were, the small group of people that were called journalists in '94 is now much bigger. There are more media. There are more. There is so much more into about reporting than a conflictual position. Because of that, the industry gets another level of maturity also, and start to also impose their own point of view. But I still believe that there is much more room of improvement, but that would come by the actors themselves, by the people who are the real guys, the players. I mean, they have to lift up the level of the debate and what they throw to the audience.
Eugene, I'm sorry. Before you bring Doctor in and to talk about certain issues, sometimes when somebody says, there is some improvements, in 1993, I stand to be corrected, Njezi Hassan published 10 Hutu commandments. Last 2 months, 2 media organs here published a list of enemies of the state. Now, I don't know.
Really?
Yes, the list of containing the names of the enemies of the state, and to me, that's like, I don't have words for that.
But you know, you have also to
Are you comparing the two?
this.
I am trying actually to say that every time there is a government encouraging journalists, some specific journalists, and they label them patriotic, and these journalists will always go as far as ignoring the basic principles of journalism, including even endangering people's lives.
Let's be practical.
Those two media were pushed by the government here to publish.
I am not saying that they are pushed by this, but what I can tell you right now is that the names of the bylines of the journalists of these 2 media companies, if I give you assignment right now to go and find these journalists in this country, I bet I will give you $200. You can't find them.
So what are you insinuating?
I am insinuating that actually, when you go at the point of trying to justify patriotism and non-patriotism and trying to do this, it is always defined by the people in power, who is a patriot and who is not. And these people in power, remember that. That's why it is very complicated to get a hero in media of Rwanda, because these guys and everybody cannot agree on.
Does this make sense? Kayumba, let me bring it in.
Probably 2 points. You know, Albert talked about the cause. He's driven by the cause. So I think it is better to interrogate that more. So what is the cause of a journalist? So the cause of a journalist, of course, the theoretical cause, the one you said we teach in school, that you have to be objective, that you serve the truth.
And be the voice of the voiceless.
Yes, be the voice of the voiceless, question power, hold them to account. That is the standard cause of a journalist. Applying that, we bring in context. My friend Muganwa talks about context, the importance of context. How is it easy to apply that standard of a journalist in real life? And finally, if you look at the media, since the beginning of modern media, even modern civilization, there has never been any government anywhere that is very happy of being criticized. There has never been people in any government that will send you a check of $200 because you have exposed their wrongdoing. All governments, because they are made of individuals, and individuals because we like putting our best foot forward, we always fight for that. The difference comes with how we deal with dissent, with how we deal with people who disagree with us, with how we deal with stories we don't like. If you are talking about Burundi, if you look at the media in Burundi, almost 90% of independent media in Burundi was destroyed. Media houses were literally burnt. Almost 90% of independent journalists in Burundi are now in exile. But what is their crime? Their crime was because they were questioning Nkurunziza. They were saying, you have served only one term. By our counting, you have served 2 terms, 10 years. Each term is 5 years. The Constitution says it is only 2 terms. The Arusha Accord say 2 terms. So if you are going against the law, if you are going against the Constitution, we think you are wrong. And by Nkurunziza and people who support him, that is unpatriotic. How can you question a head of state, the father of a nation? So questioning
is what determines whether you'll be labeled patriotic or not.
If, for example, you have a law, laws are not put there to be changed when a person just feels that this law no longer serves me. So if a journalist questions that, if I am the one and this clause, this law is going to serve me, I won't like you. So I will hold you to account. And of course, the problem in certain contexts, like here, for any journalist, for any media house to withstand that pressure, to stand against people who have power, political power and economic power, you also need 2 things. You need to be feeding yourself. If you are not able to feed yourself, if a media house is not able to pay journalists like you and survive for a certain period of time, and it is dependent on those individuals who want this form of power, you will of course praise me. You will praise those who give you bread. So this also has something to do with the economic social structure under which we operate. That is why the media here is not homogeneous. That is why the media here is not the same as in Kenya or in Uganda. The media in Kenya is largely driven by the economic motive, you know? So nation can survive whether those in power want or they don't want. So it can pay.
But
how many media houses here can survive regardless?
Yeah, but doctor, you need also.
But there is also the colonial element. If you look at media houses,
actually,
in
they
countries,
survive regardless because there is no revenue.
If you
Because this was part of the debate last time.
if you under the
So
colonial,
what Albert is saying is that point doesn't actually hold water.
the thing is the way they survive here. The way media houses
Is it
survive.
because they praise the government a lot, so the government feeds them? Is that what you're saying?
Partly.
Because they are patriotic.
But if
every morning they do their job despite there is no revenue.
Yes, the thing is, like he's saying,
Actually, they deserve a better.
if you look at the owners of media houses here, private media houses, owners.
Just say it.
They have money. They have money to buy food, yes, and shoes, and maybe
Be
a car.
honest, they have no money.
But they cannot. They cannot. They are not media houses driven by the profit motive, whereby you will be having returns every year, and you are you go very happily to revenue, so there is no problem. You pay all your journalists.
Where do you get the revenue
real
from?
salaries?
Where do you get the
they
revenue
have
from?
money, like he said.
Let's hear from the horse's mouth.
to
We have a
survive.
media owner here.
Where do you?
Yes.
So, I agree with them, but not when he's putting it in our context, because our context is not the usual academic school teaching context. I mean, yes, in Kenya. Media or Uganda, they can survive because of what? Because they are part of a private sector, and there you have a much larger private sector, so they can tap into that.
Yeah.
Here, there is absolutely no private sector that understands that if spending in media will have a return on their revenues. They don't.
And Albert, you agree that even advertisers here some advertisers advertise, and because they feel sorry for you. They don't advertise because they most don't advertise because they are serving their interests.
Yeah.
In other larger economies, where you have a bigger private sector, you have bigger businesses. Businesses advertise because it is in their interest, because they spend on you and you bring them money. Here, you know, I even worked in the media. We used to go to, how many companies do we have? We used to go to companies and they would say, they first ask questions, and if they don't like you, they will not give you money. So there is no.
But that's another debate.
That's another debate.
How can you be a patriotic journalist?
Yes.
The one we talked about.
But let me extend what you were saying. So here you don't survive because you open or you close your mouth.
So you have to.
So that's not the point.
play by
because you try just to survive because the private sector doesn't spend. The private sector doesn't spend. But neither does the government. Government doesn't spend also. I mean, they don't communicate.
So literally, therefore, the media has
the issue. The issue is simple. The issue is simple.
Because the point was about patriotism. So it's not on an economical base that they can hold them to that patriotic act the way they want. So here the environment is very different. Now, the other difference with a country like Kenya is that there is a political activity all of the time. So reporters have enough content. It's just about the choice, because there is always a minister, a this, a that, doing something, or even the president, whatever. So there is enough content generation. But here, that is the problem. I mean, whatever the government is doing is a completely different context, and means that you need to adapt now to see, to eventually, if you want to be part of that, of reporting about that, to understand what is the logic of the government, how do they move there, why do we move from a serenade into now a convention center, how did we get an Akajira Park and with lions and tomorrow rhinos and things like that.
So that is what defines
there is something that is there. So, but there is so much room in which we don't really invest.
Albert, my contention is this.
My issue is,
my contention is this: that you cannot be a patriotic citizen, a patriotic journalist, on an empty stomach.
So it plays how you...
Because a patriotic journalist, a real patriotic journalist, is somebody who holds power to account. Is somebody who reports the truth. It is not somebody,
regardless of whether he's sponsoring my show or not,
who does PR in the name of journalism.
I really have a problem with this thing that
the debate is now becoming of the two people.
No, Bob, you got the floor for a while. So no, but the question is, why would I want to be labeled a patriotic journalist? For me, this patriotism, like I say, if it's my cause, it's my personal cause. That is nothing that I have to expose in public or whatever for what I do. I really would, the same thing, I don't want to be labeled a Christian journalist. I don't want to be a Muslim journalist. I just want to be a journalist. I really don't want to be, and if I do a patriotic act, that is my choice.
Yeah, but I think what he's trying to insinuate here is that because there's that desperation for having this kind of sponsorship or these revenues, then you cannot be able to go out of your way to expose whoever is actually sponsoring, because you might not survive. This is what he's trying to say.
In any case,
it locks,
that's in any case.
It locks the minds of the journalists, and if that particular media house, that sponsor was to go contrary to societal norms, then you are not able to expose them because you are being fed by that finger, and this
actually, and the definition of a patriotic journalist in this sense is a good journalist, a journalist who reports as it is, a journalist who investigates and reports the truth, not somebody who gets the truth and sits on it and says all of us we are angels. The thing you are telling us that journalists who are talking about everything is really great.
Actually, Anangwe,
Yeah.
the fact is you can be a patriotic journalist even when you had no lunch. I insist.
You can or you can't?
You can.
You can.
You can.
So you disagree with what he says?
Patriotism is a feeling. It is not whether you ate or whether you did not eat. But he talked about context. You are also trying to talk about context. Let me bring it in this, how I understand the context here. You cannot, maybe, I don't know, I stand to be corrected, in a country where civil society itself is not active.
But you agree you're also part of it as a journalist?
Yes.
So you mean...
Yes.
Yes.
Two, where private sector is highly controlled, the economy is in the hands of government, where political space is limited, we don't have politicians who disagree, who we say that actually, he said it in Kenya, there is a political activity, there is some people, there is no political competition. There is none, totally none.
In your opinion?
In my opinion. So how do you expect the media to survive? First of all, what they will do is, and again, government narrative is highly controlled. So what the media companies did before 1994, in 97, 98, the best way to survive was trying to walk into the official narrative, whereby once the designers of a narrative found out that actually we have got the whole media towing our narrative, so there is no reason again to advertise with them. We have them. We got them. We don't need to do anything. That's all.
I don't agree.
Albert doesn't
But you see,
buy that.
Totally not.
why
as we close?
some of what
Yes.
he says is factual, is not giving the right cause. Because it does not stop you from, actually it's part of the media to create that political activity that they can continuously report on. Because if you know something or you don't promote political competition, it's not in the interest of those who have power to promote the opposition or competition. So we also have to look at our role as media if we're doing a role.
Yeah.
If it is actually desirable that we have the same situation as in Kenya.
Yeah. It has to be context. Context.
Well, but
Our this thing of called the context
It's
now
like
is
we have to
becoming
play
a
a role in.
problem.
We are also actors.
Yeah.
We are not supposed to sit on the fence and say, we're waiting
But-
for the
but-
next story
but-
to break.
but-
Bob, you had your chance. I think we're close. But time is up.
But
You had your time.
Anangwe, think about the owners of the media in Rwanda. Most of them, they are open. I am the CEO of a media company.
Yeah.
But how did I get here?
Yeah.
Why don't we have serious investors in the media here?
So
it is not the issue of professional doing people, as the doctor was saying.
The professional.
So you are saying we are not a serious investor?
No, let me tell you, we are not serious investors because serious investors cannot risk this situation. So it is the journalists who are driven by passion and driven by the cause, as he said, who are in this industry.
Yeah.
The serious
you are not serious
business people
on
who are
yeah,
investing in
finish.
who are investing in serious
yes,
money.
okay. So first of all, I believe that he gives some facts, but he doesn't give the totality of it, because first of all, the economy is not in hand of the government. The economy is being driven by the government, because they have a policy of how they want to move a country from this level of development to another one. And there, a private sector that was so small is being in fact supported by the government. So it gives you room enough as a journalist to dig into that, to see if the things are doing according to this vision. So there is room. There is indeed no competitive politics. So, but there is still room to go into there. But indeed, if you can't generate quality revenues in that sector, it's difficult to get quality salaries for quality people. So that is where I join him to say, if you don't have guys that really put enough capital into that, you cannot also develop the human capital. I mean, it will go at our pace, actually.
Back and
so,
forth.
but there is definitely room for doing investigative journalism, analysis, whatever, opinions, and all. The space is there.
Kayumba.
3 quick points.
Yeah.
First of all, it is true. You know, if you look at the history of Rwanda, if you look at the economy of Rwanda, it used to be very small. At one point, around 2008, one former CEO of Braiwa used to tell us that whenever any CEO of Braiwa got annoyed, he could get a Minister of Finance sacked because it was the only company during the Habyarimana regime paying taxes. You know, so the economy was small. Now it is growing because of that push from the government. So that is a good thing that we have now more than one company that is big. And secondly, I think we should do, like he said, we should desist from talking about patriotic journalists. We should talk about good, professional, independent journalism. Right. That is what makes sense. Otherwise, this patriotic journalism is going to divide people, and to understand that. And finally, this brings my last point. Maybe I should advise him. You should read a book called Manufacturing Consent by Naomi Chomsky and another guy called Edward Hamann. Yeah. You know, they talk about how consent, even the one we are talking about, everybody is agreeing. Even in the developed countries, how that was done using the media, and therefore, while theoretically we say media serves the ordinary person so that they get to know, broadly, anywhere, media serves those who are powerful.
This is factual.
Yes, it is factual.
I oppose that.
He opposes, and of course, that is where we actually bring down the curtain to the show. Of course, the conversation usually ends here on air, but of course, it has to go on. I'm sure it will go on in one way or another. And ladies and gentlemen, we are actually trending once again. And thank you so much. I didn't have that time to really go through all your tweets, but very quickly, I have Gatete TK who says, relentless English Western football on radio in Rwanda, Africa is a new form of obscurantism, mental slavery, and alienation. I don't really understand where that came from. But he says that young people in Rwanda assume this with no evidence is the effect of panoptism. Hey, Gatete, where are you coming from with all this kind of English? Yeah. Get rid of TK, right? Yes. We have Willie say survival that Kayumba talks of, which pushes journalists to praise bad governments, is back, or rather is lack of patriotism. Patriotism includes sacrifice, and this is what he was saying. Whether I sleep hungry or I don't get anything, I should still be able to report and speak out. Robert says, I think journalists need to be sensitive with how they report. Report with wisdom. This is the advice he says. The other one here, Wilson says, last time Mr. President, let me just go back to that. Mr. President pointed on VUP news, became news everywhere. Where are the reports now? This is what he's asking. So journalists seem to have gone back to bed, or we seem to have gone back. Hungry. Reggie says, the moment you censor yourself because you know the consequences of the environment in which you work take place. This is the context which he was saying. There's so much here. You can talk of patriotism in media when media is ever controlled or censored by a government and used as a tool for propaganda. I have so many of them. Thank you so much, Emma. You also watching, and many others who have been watching. Let's keep this conversation going, and your thoughts coming. Hashtag is debate411. We'll see you again next time, same place. And of course, my name as always is Eugene and Nangwe. Goodbye.